Me this opportunity to stand in front of you today and talk a little bit about myself and how I collided with climate change. Carrie earlier mentioned the power of an image and then off the screen, so I hope I'm able to keep your interest as well in that way. Now, let me try to work this. Oh, there you are. Okay, so as Bidya Didi mentioned already, I am to work on climate change issues, environmental issues, ancestry. My particular focus and my love is in the mountains, which is also a reason I'm a mountaineer. So I work particularly with mountain communities and especially the youth. So I'll be sharing a few of my stories today about that. I thought it'd be nice to start my presentation with a view of the mountains, you know. This is up on Mount Everest itself. It's taken at about 7,300 meters, and you can see how absolutely spectacular it is from up there. It's not quite NASA. It's not high enough for a NASA picture, but it's still quite high. So again, another picture, you know, of the mountains, and you can see a lot of it is all ice and snow. And as a mountaineer, that's the stuff I really love to play in. And started to see climate change in the context of mountains and really from a mountaineer's perspective. I'll give you a small story about how exactly I collided with climate change. This is a place called the Khumbu Icefall, and it's between 5,300 meters and 6,000 meters. It is on the way to the first camp on the mountain on Mount Everest. And it's basically a frozen waterfall, hence the name Icefall. And the icefall itself is considered one of the more dangerous places on Mount Everest to be because, as you can see, everything is falling down. Here's some more climbers just going through the icefall. And us mountaineers, we have to cross over the crevasses, the huge blocks of ice. We have to cross over on ladders like this and like this. So in 2007, when I was climbing, an accident occurred, and a fellow climber that I knew quite well, she passed away. And her body had to be retrieved from up high on the mountain. And as I went back up the icefall, at this point I'd already summited, I'd already reached the top, and I'd packed to go home. At that time, her husband asked me if I would go and help because there weren't enough mountaineers who were free. They were all cleaning up the camps high up on the mountain, and I was one of the few people who was free. So I said, okay, no problem, I'll go up. And on the way up, I met a group of Sherpas who were on my own expedition, and they said to me, Dawa, don't go up today because if you go, you're going to die. Because the icefall was creaking and crumbling so badly, it was melting so fast that every step I took, I could hear the ice underneath me popping and cracking. And on the trail, I was walking at times in about an inch of sludge. So it was really, really hot. And at that time, I thought, actually a pretty good idea because, you know, I don't want ice the size of a supertanker falling on top of me. So I decided, okay, that's good advice. I'll go back with you. Now what happened that same day, an hour later, was that exact section where I was at, where I turned back, collapsed. Literally, the whole thing gave in, caved in, and had I not turned back, I would probably have been in there. So at that time, I thought to myself, geez, this is serious stuff. You know, climate change to me at that point was just something theoretical. But then at that point, I realized that this was something serious, and it was going to affect mountaineers, and in particular Sherpas like myself who are up in the mountains year in, year out. And you know, with more amounts of avalanches that we're seeing, more serac collapses, more rock falls, this is going to have serious implications for mountaineering. So then I started to think, well, what can I do? And then when I came back, I started to do a little bit more research about this. What's happening up in the mountains? And one of the first things as a mountaineer that you see is that the glaciers are all melting, and there's no doubt about that. You know, this is a popular trekking route in the Dhaulagiri area, and the route just goes straight through puddles and ponds. So here's a bigger view from higher up. You can see all the molten ice, the potholes as it were inside the glacier, supraglacial lakes, if I'm not mistaken. That's what Isimo's taught me. So But it's not just on the glacier, but it's also at base camp. This is my tent at base camp in 2007. And what you see there is that the ice all around my tent has melted away. It's actually just what's under my tent, which was sheltered from the heat, from the sun, that's still remaining. Don't make the mistake of thinking that I actually built a tent on a pinnacle. I actually had it on flat ground, and over the 2 months that I was there, it completely melted away. And at some points, the tents can be 3 meters high, and that's the rate of melting. Now, some may say, okay, but it's a seasonal thing. The tents, you put the tent up when it's cold, and then as the summer comes along, it melts. But in fact, there's plenty of evidence from a mountaineer's perspective, from our own anecdotal history, as it were, that this isn't normal. For example, back in the 80s, when some of the cooks I climbed with, some of the cooks on my team, who would be responsible for setting base camp, they tell me that back in those days, back in the 80s, there would be no surface water on the glacier, that it was all frozen, it was all ice. And when the summer came along, then you start to see trickles of little streams here and there. But now what we have is when you arrive early in April at base camp, there's already big torrents going through base camp. Another bit of evidence, again, observations, is the fact that the pinnacles in the icefall and on the glacier where base camp is located, they used to be about 100 meters high. At least that's what we reckon from the length of rope that they used to fix on those pinnacles for training before going up on the mountain. They would stay there and they'd train the young Sherpas and so on. So we know that these pinnacles were very high. Now you'd be lucky to find anything higher than 20 meters, and I could probably do it in my sports shoes, So it's not, it really is possible to see it now if you go there yourself. And especially for those who haven't got the opportunity to go up there, ISIMO has done a picture show in the past called 50 Years of Climate Change, and you can see those changes with the comparison photographs as well. So, but it's not just mountaineers that are affected. This is probably one of the most famous lakes, and well, at least in this room, I'm sure everybody's heard of Imja Lake. And from a scientific point of view, it's melting very fast. It's one of the more critically dangerous lakes, etc. But as a Sherpa, as somebody who comes from the Khumbu, from the Everest region where this lake is, this is more than just scientific data to us. This is, in fact, one of the biggest threats to our livelihoods. First of all, we depend on tourism, and about 60 or 70% of the trail to Everest Base Camp is directly downstream of this lake. So this is one big threat. And the other big threat is also that most of the villages are right along the river, because as you can see, we can't really build high up on the steep slopes, because sometimes that's also a solution that people pose. Why don't you move higher up on the mountain? Well, you tell me where exactly I'm going to put my village. So the point here is, if that lake bursts tomorrow, villages like this one here are going to be affected. Villages where I personally also have ancestral land, where I have farmhouses, where my yaks go to graze, at least my family's yaks go to graze. So like myself and my family, there's a lot of other families just living in the disaster zone, the potential disaster zone. So this is something that we're extremely afraid of. Something needs to be done. And at that point, at that time in 2007, I saw all this and I thought to myself, gee, something needs to be done. But I'm only one person, and bloody hell, I'm only 23 years old. What can I do? So the answer actually came to me when I was going to parties and so on, when my friends met somebody boring at a party, and they would try to get rid of them. What they would say is, oh, have you met my friend, Dawa? He's climbed Everest. So the focus would instantly be on me. Oh, you've climbed Everest. Exit friend. So the point is, people were really interested in what I had to say about Everest. Every time I said I climbed Everest, people would be, geez, really, what's it like? Tell me all about it. And then I thought, if people are so interested in my Everest story, maybe I should give them a story that's worth telling. So I thought, I'll do what I do best. I'll go climb again, and I'll go to the top of Mount Everest, and I'll spread the climate change message. We got to do something about the Himalayas. They're melting. And everybody's going to be affected by this. So that's when I partnered with Easy Mode. And it was Easy Mode's 25th anniversary. And Basanta sir right here and myself, we worked tirelessly for months and finally got the whole thing set up. And we did it. And in 2008, 21st of May, sorry. My altitude's actually gone in my brain, so sorry. 21st of May 2008, I stood on the top of Mount Everest, and that was the Eco Everest expedition. And then in subsequent years, in 2009, I decided somebody else would be better to take the message up, and that was Apa Sherpa. And this is his 19th time on the top of Mount Everest, saying a simple message: stop climate change, let the Himalayas live. So 2009 and 2010, Apa Sherpa has been taking the message of stopping climate change to the top of Mount Everest. And you'll hear a little bit more about the summit of Mount Everest in a short bit. But as Vidya already mentioned earlier, I also tried some new ideas on the mountain to be a little bit more friendlier as a mountaineer. Who's going to really enjoy myself up there. And so when you take from a place, you also have to give back. And it seemed to me at that time that we mountaineers were taking more from the mountains than giving back. So one of the first things I thought I'd do, since we're on the topic of climate change anyways, is why don't we use something else than kerosene up there to cook? So I tried solar cookers, and they were so successful that it could cook. In the heat up there, in the sun up there, it could boil 10 liters of water in 35 minutes, which meant that my cooks had plenty of hot water, and all my Sherpas were the cleanest Sherpas because they were taking showers all the time. But I also tried something else, which was a garbage cleanup. What I saw was when the climbers were going up, they would go up with big loads. As I said, we were up there for 2 months, and we can't just climb in one push. We have to go up and down, acclimatize, set up tents, set up camp 1, come back down, set up camp 2, etc. So as we're taking loads up, we come down empty. And then I thought, these guys are super strong. They're coming downhill anyways. So why don't I give them an incentive to pick up garbage along the way and bring it down to base camp? So I started something called Cash for Trash. And I went to every camp, and I said to all the climbers, look guys, if you find any garbage on the way down, just bring it down and I will give you 100 rupees per kilo of garbage. So that worked pretty well. And also I thought, there's another personal story about human waste, about taking a crap in the mountains, which I don't want to go into because this is a more dignified gathering. So the point is that what I also introduced was toilet bags and a system that is used on Mount McKinley in Alaska called a Clean Mountain Can. And I've been encouraging the use of these so that the mountain stays clean of both, well, garbage obviously, but also of human waste. So this has been very popular, and in the subsequent years since 2008, more and more expeditions are now starting to use these solutions to keep our mountains clean. So to give you a basic idea, since 2008, when we first did the cleanup, we've now, until this year, cleaned up almost 12,000 kilograms. It's something like 11,980 or something like that. So 12,000 kilos of garbage we've brought down from Mount Everest, and approximately 300 kilos of human waste has been properly disposed of that would otherwise be on the mountain. So then, that's my mountaineering story. It's okay for a few of us. There's a very small